Hey guys, I'm in the greenhouse today and I'm preparing to plant some tomato plants, and these are extremely important tips that you can use when you're planting your tomatoes. There's three things that you really need to add to the planting hole. Now yesterday I did a video about an additive you can spray on the tomato plant and you can put at the base at the soil level, and I'll link that description right here to that video. But today I'm talking about something you're going to be putting in the planting hole. Three things that are extremely critical, and I'm going to give you close to 20 to 30 reasons for the entire of those three things, the entire reasons that is so important to use those and all the beneficial factors involved there. So let's go out and plant one and I'll show you exactly what we're doing here. So the first thing we're adding to the hole is we've dug our hole, but what we want to do is the additive I'm putting in right now, you want a small, maybe a 1/4 inch soil barrier between the base of the root system and this product. So just remember, you're going to dig it a little bit deeper than you normally would. And there we go. Now this is something you can get at the dollar store, sometimes 2 cans for $1 in the States. And that is sardines in water. And so we're just going to open that up. Place 1 sardine, if they're small, below the plant. And you can do 2 if you want to, but we want a small 1/4 inch barrier of soil between, like I said, between the root system and the sardines, so that way the root system can grow into them. But there's a couple of more things I'm going to add to this hole, into the soil all around the root ball. Now if you're doing bare root, you may want to soak them to rehydrate them, but just remember that's the first thing we're putting in is the very inexpensive sardines that are in a can of water. And then the next thing, we're going to add 2 more products that we actually mix in with the soil around the root ball itself. Now the next thing we're adding, we're going to just mix it in with the soil that's going to go back into the planting hole all around the root ball of this. And as I said earlier, if you're doing this bare root, then you just want to take and mix it with the soil that you are going to be putting around the roots. But this is just common wood ash. I burn this in my fire pit. I have a lot of limbs and things like that around the yard. So you just take your wood ash, 1 tablespoon to roughly about 1 to 2 cups of soil, mix it in there quite well. And then we'll go on to the third additive, and I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to give you 20 to 30 reasons why each one of these work with your tomatoes and why you'll see massive harvest, healthier plants, and less disease. And of course, yesterday's video will teach you how to repel insects away from your tomato plant. If you'll take a look at that video, if you're having a problem with insects, as I always do each summer. So let's go on to the third item we're adding to our planting soil. Now the last thing we're going to add to the soil that goes back into the planting hole there is about 1 tablespoon of bone meal, and this is also an extremely important component. Just mix it in well. We're going to take our plant, remove a couple of the lower limbs. We want to have more root production. We're going to put this back in there, make sure it's getting there, firm it down a little bit so in case we have a rainstorm come in, it won't lean over. Give it a good press down all around the root ball. And you can even come back and add just a little bit more of the wood ash because it is so important. Just kind of sprinkle it around there. And of course at the end of the video, or maybe once I've got everything planted, I'm going to go back and add yesterday's additive for insect control and a few other things. But let me go back into the greenhouse and I'll explain to you each one of these items and why it's so important to add for a healthy and extremely productive tomato plant. So I'm going to give you the rundown of 10, if I can think of 10 things or 10 reasons to add each one of those. The first one is for the wood ash, and it provides a mild fertilizer and improves the taste. It helps setting of the flowers and becoming fruit, and it just improves the plant overall. So that's number 1 on our wood ash. Now the second reason you want to use wood ash around your tomato plants is it adds calcium, and that also will help prevent blossom end rot. Sometimes if tomato plants can't get enough calcium, you'll notice the bottom of your tomato plant will have a rotten look. The top portion of it, maybe the top 90%, looks perfectly fine, but when you look underneath, there's a lot of rot at the base, and that's from a lack of calcium. And wood ash will help put calcium into your tomato plants and prevent that from happening. Now wood ash also slightly raises your pH because it's alkaline, and tomato plants prefer a acidity of about 6 to 6.8, so it actually helps with the pH of your soil as well. Now, the reason I went back and sprinkled a little bit of wood ash on the soil surface, on some soft-bodied insects, it can help repel them, such as pill bugs. It can keep them away from your tomato plants, and they can do a little bit of damage there. So sprinkle a little bit of it maybe once a week on the soil surface, and I have tons of this, so once a week is not bad because I'm getting this for free from my fire pit. I just keep it in a 5-gallon bucket once the ash is cooled down, and I make sure we're not going to melt a 5-gallon bucket. So insect control is another reason to use wood ash around your tomatoes. Now, over time, wood ash used year after year can help improve your soil structure and help drainage. So that's another reason you want to use it around your tomatoes. If you're going back and planting them, maybe even if you're doing crop rotation and different things going into that same planting hole, it's going to help with drainage and other things that will help each vegetable that you put in that spot year after year. Another thing that wood ash will do is it helps add minerals to the soil, and that is one of the most important things for your tomato plants, cucumbers, whatever else you have growing, because so many soils in the US are depleted of minerals. So that's what is really important, is adding minerals back to your soil, because ultimately they end up in your produce. Now, I have free pickup for certain waste, and they'll come out with a large crane at the end of my yard, pick it up, put it on a truck, and take it to a landfill. And I think that's such a waste when you have tree limbs from a storm, and I have tons of trees in my yard, but those tree limbs can be reused to make wood ash, and it takes a huge pile of tree limbs and reduces it down to like a 5-gallon bucket. So I can have a mound of tree limbs after a storm, and I can just reduce it down, keep it, put a lid on the 5-gallon bucket, and so I'm recycling those tree limbs where they're not ending up in a landfill taking up a lot of space. Now, wood ash is not a complete fertilizer, but it does work in conjunction with a natural organic fertilizer. So it's a mild fertilizer, but not as strong as some of the ones you're going to get off the shelf, and certainly not as strong as some synthetic fertilizers. So it helps in conjunction with those fertilizers, just slightly, but it does help. Now, using wood ash year after year will also help reduce your need for lime. If you're having to go out and purchase lime to put in your garden, this can take the place of that and help naturally adjust the pH for you. Now, wood ash, and I have a problem with different funguses and bacteria in my soil because we have so much humidity and so much rain during the summer, so it will also act as a very mild fungicide that might attack your tomato plants and cause diseases. So that's 10 reasons for using wood ash. Let's move on to the next 10 for using sardines. Now, when talking about putting sardines in your garden, I already know the question that's coming: isn't wildlife, cats and things like that, going to dig up your tomato plants? If you have an extremely large wildlife population around your garden, it's possible but unlikely, because you're going to be planting it below the tomato plant, actually below the soil below that. But there is a way to prevent it if you think it's a possibility, and this will not change the flavor, will not hurt your tomatoes, is by using cayenne powder and putting it around the base of the tomato plant just for the first few weeks, maybe once a week, and that will repel any wildlife. Once they get a sniff of that cayenne pepper powder, they're going to run away very quickly. So that's the first thing I wanted to cover, because I know that's going to be a question when it comes to putting sardines under the tomato plant. You're not putting them close to the surface where animals can smell them easily. Is it possible an animal could find it? Yes, it's possible, but the cayenne pepper will act as a repellent for any wildlife that might come to it. So let's go through 10 reasons, if I can think of it, for using sardines around your tomato plants. Now, the first reason you would want to put sardines under your tomato plants is this, like a slow release fertilizer, and it's slowly going to release nitrogen into the soil, which is going to help the leaf growth of your tomatoes and the overall health. It contains a lot of other things, but primarily in the beginning you want to think about nitrogen to get the tomato off to a healthy start. So nitrogen slow release fertilizer would be number one. Now, the second reason is it releases the sardines. The bones in the sardine contain a lot of phosphorus, and that's going to help with fruit production. So the bones, even though we're using bone meal as an additive to the soil around it, these bones in the sardines are also going to help just kind of work together with the powder, and it will definitely help with fruit production. Now, the sardines also help put calcium into the soil and ultimately into your plant. And again, that's going to help with blossom end right, as I mentioned also on the wood ash. Now, as I said initially, it also helps act as kind of a slow release fertilizer. So you're not dumping a large amount of synthetic fertilizer and getting this huge rush of nutrients, and you have a lot of leaf growth, but not a lot of fruit production. So a slow release fertilizer is going to help slowly produce fruit over time across the entire growing season and even into the following year, because those nutrients and minerals are going to remain in the soil year after year, and they slowly break down and are absorbed by your plants. Now with sardines, the combination of phosphorus and trace minerals are definitely going to help produce more flowers, which means more tomatoes ultimately. So the combination of those two work in conjunction with each other to help produce more tomatoes. Now I can't tell you how many times I've heard this, that the earthworm is the most important thing you can have in your garden because of worm castings, and they aerate the soil. But as the sardines slowly decompose, they're going to attract earthworms to your garden, and especially around the base of your tomato plant. So if you ever wanted to have just one thing in your garden, it would be earthworms. Now, using the sardines also improves soil fertility over a long period of time. If you do this every year, your soil will become so rich that you'll never have to add bagged soil back to your garden, because you're improving it a little bit each year over a long period of time. So improving soil fertility is another reason to use sardines. So sardines contain zinc, iron, and magnesium, three important trace minerals that are going to help your plants extremely in the first season there. So just remember, those three minerals are extremely important for fruit production and the overall health of your tomato plant. Now, one thing that I love about gardening is if I can find something that's super cheap. And if you go to your dollar store and kind of look through them there, a lot of times the discounted sardines will be either close to being out of date or out of date, and you can get the sardines even less. I found them for 25 cents a can, and I stocked up on about 20 cans that were out of date. And that doesn't matter for your tomatoes, not to eat, but for your tomato plants. Having out of date sardines are no problem at all. So one reason I think it's really important to use sardines in the garden, it reduces your overall need for synthetic fertilizers, and a lot of those chemicals, they're not really good for your plants long term. Sometimes they can have negative effects on them. So using anything organic or natural, always opt for that when possible. Now, the third of the three components is bone meal, and it's extremely important to mix that with the soil around your potting hole, just 2 to 3 inches out from a small root ball. If you're planting a large tomato plant, you may double that to 3 to 6, but it contains phosphorus, and that will help your tomato plant become more quickly established in your garden. Now, the bone meal contains a lot of phosphorus, an abnormally high amount. We're talking about bones that have been ground up into a fine, like baby powder consistency, and that also has a lot of phosphorus in it, and it's going to help with fruit production. So that in the NPK number, that P, phosphorus, is extremely important and when it comes to vegetables. So you'll find that bone meal mixed with the soil around it will help boost your tomato production year after year. So bone meal also increases flower production, which ultimately produces more fruit on each plant. So that's another reason, and the NPK number, phosphorus, is you're going to have more flowers and more fruit throughout the growing season. Now, another thing that bone meal will do is, if you've ever noticed your tomato plants will produce a flower and for some reason it falls off, well, that is one thing that bone meal can help prevent, is flower drop. And so putting that in the soil around the plant will help those flowers go on to become actual tomatoes and fruits. It's just one of those things that a lot of people don't understand. Why do they have so much flower drop? It has to do with the nutrients in the soil and what you failed to add to the soil. So bone meal, more flowers, more tomatoes. Now, as with the other two organic components we've talked about, this breaks down slowly over a period of time. Bone meal does not quickly break down because of rain or what other being absorbed. It's going to do it over a long period of time. So once you do this to the soil, once at the beginning of the growing season and once in the middle, this is going to last all summer long, all the way to the end of your growing season, and possibly help boost next year's growing season. So it's a very slow breakdown of bone meal in the soil. So I've touched on blossom enright several times, and if you've ever noticed the bottom of your tomato having that, bone meal will add calcium to your soil, and that's another thing that you want to do to prevent blossom enright, because once that happens, your tomato is pretty much ruined. Now, the bone meal also adds phosphorus and calcium, which helps the plant be overall stronger. It helps stronger leaves. In turn, a stronger plant is able to resist disease and attacks from insects a lot better than one that's very weak. Your plant may look okay, but it may be very weak because it's missing some of these essential components in its growth. Now, bone meal is one of my favorite things to use on my tomatoes because it's completely organic, and that's one of the great things is if you can go with organic over synthetic fertilizers when possible, then bone meal is your option for that. Bone meal can also balance your pH in your soil if it's too far one way or the other, so it acts as a natural balancing agent for your tomatoes. If it's too alkaline, too pH, it could kind of stabilize that for you. So now it's April, the first week, and bone meal actually works best in cooler soils. So if you're planting in the cooler time of the year, that's going to help your plants get established a lot quicker. Is those cooler nights, bone meal actually works better. So bone meal is very cost effective. It's very inexpensive, and it's really a byproduct of the animal production of foods. The bones are basically just ground up. It's kind of a leftover component of that process. So you're getting bone meal at a huge discount if you buy it at the right place. And I bought this bag for practically nothing, and it's lasted for several years, and I only use a small amount. I don't have to use more than a tablespoon per plant. Now, one of the things that I learned early on, and this is away from the three components, but I just want to give you one final tip on planting tomatoes. Tomatoes grow extremely well when they're not competing for nutrients with other things. So it's so important to put things down like shredded pine bark or pine straw, even hay, to prevent that competition from weeds that pop up. Because the one thing I learned very quickly 25 years ago when I started gardening on this piece of property is weeds will pop up so quickly. So make sure you put some type of mulch around your tomato plants and away from them, at least 1 to 2 feet, to stop the competition from weeds that are going to inevitably pop up all around your tomato plants. So it makes it a super easy thing to do, is plant tomatoes without having to do the weeding. So in case you're wondering what variety of tomato this is, I've started these from seeds in the greenhouse early, or actually late winter, early spring, and they've done extremely well by adding some of these components to the soil. And I didn't put sardines in these, but I did put bone meal and wood ash, and they have performed extremely well. These have done, in just about less than 2 months, they've done extremely well, and they've grown quite a bit. So I'll be planting these today. Hopefully we're past our freezing temperatures. Like I say, we're getting a kind of an early spring. So guys, if you have any questions about this video or any previous video, because I have, I believe, over 200 videos now, gardening and things about the greenhouse and other topics that I find interesting. Before you leave that question, please become a public subscriber, because I always filter questions and comments by public subscribers. So if you have something you want answered, I'll try to get to it as soon as possible. I get a lot of comments every week, so it's hard to answer every question, but I do put the subscribers at the very front of the line. So guys, thanks so much for watching, and I really appreciate it. Have a great day.